I never thought a door could start a war. But in Maple Grove, a quiet suburb lined with identical lawns and white-trimmed porches, one retired painter's front door became a symbol of defiance. When the HOA demanded she repaint her $900 red masterpiece before inspection day, it wasn't just about color anymore, it was about control. What happens when a woman who spent her life adding color to other people's homes refuses to let her own be muted? The air in Maple Grove always smelled of fresh mulch and conformity. You could drive down every street and barely tell one house from another. But at the end of Elmcrest Drive stood Marjorie's cottage, small, neat, and crowned with a rich crimson door that seemed to catch sunlight like a flame. Marjorie had lived here for 8 years. A retired painter, she'd built her career restoring old farmhouses across the Midwest. She'd poured the last of her savings into this home, choosing Maple Grove because she thought it was peaceful, quiet neighbors, manicured lawns, a sense of community. But beneath that calm ran the constant hum of the homeowners association, an invisible force dictating everything from grass height to mailbox trim. The HOA board was led by a woman named Denise Callahan, a textbook by the rules chairperson who treated every meeting like a courtroom. Denise had no patience for deviation. She was the kind who color-coded her recycling bins and measured holiday lights with a ruler. When she sent Marjorie a courtesy reminder citing CCR Section 7.2 exterior paint approvals, it seemed harmless at first. The letter arrived in a cream envelope stamped with the HOA seal. Inside, a single page. Notice of non-compliance. Front door color unapproved. Corrective repaint required before May 18th. Failure to comply may result in fine. There was no photo, no courtesy call, just that one stiff paragraph. Marjorie laughed at first, thinking it had to be a mistake. She had submitted her color choice months earlier, matching the official shade palette to brick red, code CR 112. She'd even attached a paint sample. Still, Denise's reminder gnawed at her. So she checked the HOA's online archive, dozens of PDFs filled with bureaucratic language. There it was, CCR Section 7.2.1, Exterior Color Variations. It listed approved shades, but brick red had mysteriously vanished. Marjorie didn't know it yet, but the board had quietly revised the palette 2 weeks earlier, without notifying homeowners. The inspection, in 3 days, wasn't about aesthetics. It was a power play. I still remember the day I first saw her door shimmer under the morning light. The sun caught it at just the right angle, turning the crimson into molten gold. Neighbors slowed their cars to admire it, some even snapping photos. But admiration turned to whispers. A few board members lived on the same street, and they didn't like distractions. That's how things start in HOA territory, not with confrontation, but with gossip. Someone complained to the compliance officer, who logged it as a visual inconsistency. From there, it rolled downhill into Denise's lap. Maple Grove's April meeting took place at the community hall, a brick building beside the playground. Marjorie showed up, wearing paint-stained jeans and carrying her folder of documents. I wasn't part of the board, just another neighbor who came to watch the show. And in Maple Grove, board meetings were a show. Denise called the session to order with her signature gavel tap. The minutes dragged through landscaping bids, noise complaints, and pool maintenance budgets before finally reaching exterior aesthetic violations. When Marjorie's address appeared on the projector, a few board members leaned forward, eager for drama. Denise spoke calmly, almost gleefully, about unauthorized deviations from approved community tones. Her phrasing made it sound like a crime scene. Then she announced that Marjorie's red door disrupted the neighborhood's uniform charm and could reduce property values. That line hit like a slap. Property values, Maple Grove's favorite weapon. Marjorie kept her composure, stating that she had approval from a previous year's board. She held up the signed Exterior Modification Form, 2022. But Denise brushed it aside, claiming the new palette overrode old permissions. That's when Marjorie asked one question that froze the room: if my color isn't allowed anymore, why wasn't anyone told? Denise blinked. The silence that followed stretched too long. It was clear, no notification had ever been sent. The following morning, Maple Grove's newsletter dropped into everyone's mailbox, a cheery front page about spring cleaning, and a small side note about unapproved colors being reviewed for compliance. It was subtle, but the message was clear, a warning shot aimed at one red door. That's where the story should have ended: quiet repaint, small fine, problem solved. But Marjorie wasn't the type to surrender a brushstroke of her independence. She'd spent years following other people's color charts. She wasn't about to let someone else dictate her home's personality. So she made a plan. The next day, she dug deeper into the HOA's archives, pulling up old meeting minutes and proposal drafts. I know because she told me about it later, laughing at the absurdity. The updated palette had been introduced in a closed subcommittee vote by Denise and two allies, without quorum. Meaning it wasn't legally binding. Marjorie printed the section, highlighted Article 9, Section B.3, amendments require full board vote, and slid it into a plastic folder labeled Evidence. That was her first prop, her secret weapon. But there was another problem: the inspection deadline was still ticking. May 18th, 3 days away. A fine of $100 per day loomed if she didn't comply. She could have painted over it, but every brushstroke would have felt like surrender. So she didn't. On May 17th, a compliance officer arrived with a clipboard. He took photos, scribbled notes, and left a bright yellow tag taped to her mailbox: pending violation, corrective action required. Neighbors started noticing the tag before she even tore it down. That evening, someone uploaded a photo of the red door to the local community group. The caption read, "Rule breaker or artist?" Within hours, the post exploded with comments. Some praised her defiance. Others demanded fair enforcement. The HOA's quiet power trip had suddenly gone public. By morning, the tension in Maple Grove felt electric. I watched Denise pace her driveway, phone in hand, whispering to board members. The HOA had always ruled from behind closed doors, but now, their authority was on display. Marjorie stayed calm, tending her rose bushes as if nothing had happened. She even repainted her garden bench the same crimson shade, purely out of spite. People slowed down just to stare. That afternoon, an envelope appeared, stamped "Final Notice. Failure to comply will result in administrative fine of $300 and referral to legal committee as of May 20th. It was signed, again, by Denise. Marjorie taped the notice to her kitchen cabinet, right next to a watercolor painting of poppies she'd done years ago. My inspiration wall, she called it. I could tell she wasn't scared. She was planning something bigger, something she knew would hit where it hurt most. The board underestimated her completely. They saw a retired woman with paint on her sleeves and assumed she'd fold. But Marjorie had once restored courthouse murals across Illinois. She knew how to read codes and statutes better than most lawyers. She began collecting every HOA letter she'd ever received: dates, signatures, headers. She lined them on her table like evidence in a courtroom drama. Then she highlighted discrepancies: wrong meeting dates, missing signatures, non-standard formatting. It was bureaucratic chaos disguised as order. Her second prop appeared here, a printed copy of Maple Grove HOA Board Agenda, April 4th. At the bottom, a line read, "Palette revisions, postponed." Proof that the update had never been finalized. The power struggle wasn't just about color anymore. It was about authority, and the moment one woman proved the board didn't have any, their control would crack. Marjorie wrote her rebuttal like a legal memo. Calm, factual, devastatingly polite. She cited Article 9, Section B.3, attached her Exterior Modification Form, 2022, and included the meeting agenda as Exhibit B. Then, she mailed copies to every board member via certified mail, signature required. That weekend, the community buzzed with rumors. The newsletter editor even hinted that a resident had challenged the HOA's amendment process. The board scrambled for damage control, scheduling an emergency meeting to clarify color policy. But it was too late. Someone from the community group leaked a screenshot of her certified mail receipt. The caption read, "She lawyered up without a lawyer." By Sunday afternoon, the neighborhood had chosen sides. Some painted small red ribbons on their mailboxes in solidarity. Others whispered that Marjorie was ruining the community's image. The irony? More people were driving through Maple Grove to see the red door than ever before. The HOA's plan to suppress individuality had turned into free publicity for rebellion. And still, Denise doubled down. On May 20th, a thick envelope appeared on Marjorie's porch, administrative fine notice, this time with a running balance of $300 due immediately, plus legal review fees. That's when I realized we were watching a full-blown HOA nightmare unfold. But the HOA's arrogance had one fatal flaw: everything they filed left a paper trail. And Marjorie had already traced that trail right back to the source. She photocopied every letter, dated every interaction, and started assembling a binder thick enough to rival a court record. She called it her Crimson Case File. Each plastic sleeve shimmered with defiance, final notices, CCR excerpts, and copies of certified receipts. Then she did something brilliant. She left the binder sitting open on her porch table during the next Saturday yard sale. Visitors leafed through it, laughing at the absurdity. Someone took a photo, and by evening, that image went viral in a neighboring community group. That's how the rest of us learned the truth: the HOA's own paperwork didn't match their claims. The red door had become legend. And the war had only just begun. By the time June rolled around, the Crimson Case File had become a local legend. Neighbors stopped pretending not to care. They slowed their walks just to glance at the door glowing under the afternoon sun, as if it were a flag for quiet rebellion. The HOA had tried to silence a single homeowner, and in doing so, they'd made her a symbol. The board held an emergency clarification session on June 3rd. I attended again, notebook in hand. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and tension. Denise sat at the head table flanked by two board allies, her eyes fixed on the printout of Marjorie's file that someone had leaked online. Denise opened with a speech about maintaining uniformity for community prosperity. Her voice trembled just slightly when she reached the part about unapproved materials circulated without authorization. We all knew she meant the binder. Marjorie sat quietly in the back, her arms folded. She didn't need to speak. The binder had already spoken for her. A new letter was rumored to be coming, a legal demand, not just a fine. And this time, the stakes weren't hundreds of dollars. It was the threat of a lien. 3 days later, the rumor proved true. A cream envelope with legal review notice stamped across the top arrived in Marjorie's mailbox. Inside, a dense 2-page document outlining potential lien placement under CCR Section 9.5, Collection of Fines. It demanded payment of $600 and warned of further action. The paper crackled when she unfolded it on her kitchen counter. You could almost feel the chill of authority in the language, every sentence designed to intimidate. But this time, Marjorie didn't flinch. She poured herself coffee, sat by the window, and began annotating the notice in red pen. Each note was crisp, deliberate. Her third evidence prop emerged then, a printed copy of CCR Section 9.5 Collection Procedures. Highlighted in orange was one line: fines exceeding $500 require prior board approval recorded in public minutes. She checked the minutes. No vote existed. So once again, the board had overstepped. She drafted another letter, short, surgical, impossible to ignore. It reminded the HOA that enforcement without proper approval constituted procedural error. Then she ended it with a line that would echo through Maple Grove for months. I am fully compliant until proven otherwise. She mailed it, certified. Then she waited. The waiting game became psychological warfare. Denise ramped up patrols. Compliance officers began random yard inspections across the block. You could almost hear the click of phone cameras from passing cars. The tension spread like humidity before a storm. And in that heavy stillness, the real turning point began. A neighbor's teen had posted a short video of the red door paired with upbeat music. Within a week, it hit 50,000 views. Suddenly, Maple Grove's strict little community became an internet example of HOA ridiculous rules. Comments poured in calling it a HOA nightmare and a classic HOA versus homeowner saga. The attention made Denise furious, but it also drew eyes from outside the neighborhood. A local reporter reached out, asking for comment on the Maple Grove color controversy. No one knew how they found the story, maybe the video, maybe a tip. But it didn't matter. The spotlight was on, and Denise couldn't hide behind bylaws anymore. That week's board meeting overflowed. Chairs filled, walls lined, the air hot with whispers and the smell of coffee gone stale. I could feel every heartbeat in the room as Denise announced that, due to misrepresentation in media, she would reassert board authority. But she overplayed her hand. Marjorie stood up, calm as ever, holding a stack of documents. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. The entire room leaned forward as she referenced Article 9, Section B.3, and presented the meeting agenda labeled Palette Revisions, Postponed. The same one the board had tried to bury. Gasps rippled across the room. Denise tried to redirect, citing confidentiality, but the damage was done. People began whispering words like invalid vote and unlawful amendment. For the first time, the board's authority cracked in public view. And once that facade broke, there was no way to glue it back together. Over the next few days, Denise fought back with memos, newsletters, and policy reminders, but it only fueled more dissent. Residents began pulling old records, double-checking bylaws, and discovering inconsistencies. The HOA's fortress of control was full of leaks. One morning, a letter circulated through mailboxes, not from the board, but from a group calling itself the Homeowners Review Committee. It announced an informal petition to audit all pending fines and amendments. Within 24 hours, half the neighborhood had signed. Denise called it organized disobedience. The rest of us called it progress. The board scrambled to maintain order. They scheduled a special compliance review on June 22 to resolve the color issue conclusively. The meeting agenda leaked early, and at the bottom of the second page, one cryptic line appeared. Potential motion, revocation of prior enforcement action. It meant they were considering backing down, but not admitting fault. By that evening, residents gathered in driveways whispering theories. Could Marjorie actually win? Would they rescind the fine? Then, on June 20th, 2 days before the meeting, an envelope appeared again, this time slipped under her doormat. No stamp, no seal. Just a single sheet reading. You've made your point. Repaint and we'll forget the fines. No signature. No header. Just threat disguised as compromise. That note was the spark she needed to take everything public. She'd kept her fight quiet until now, but the time for quiet was over. That night, she scanned every document, the final notice, the administrative fine, the unsigned note, and compiled them into a digital file titled HOA Enforcement History. She shared it anonymously with the same community group that had posted the first video. The next morning, the post went viral again, this time hitting local news outlets. The story headline was simple. Homeowners Association threatens fine over red door, gets challenged by retiree armed with bylaws. By noon, reporters were parked near Maple Grove's gate. Cameras rolled as cars passed, catching glimpses of the infamous red door glowing under the summer sun. Denise called an emergency press statement, claiming procedural misunderstanding. But everyone could read between the lines. The HOA had lost control of its narrative. And yet, even with public pressure mounting, Denise refused to surrender entirely. The special compliance review would proceed as planned. June 22 at 6 p.m., the showdown. Marjorie prepared like she always did, with quiet precision. She reorganized her crimson case file, labeled each document, and added her newest exhibit, a printed screenshot of the unsigned note. She sealed it in a plastic sleeve marked Exhibit C, Anonymous Communication. It wasn't just paperwork anymore. It was evidence of intimidation. The upcoming meeting wasn't about color anymore, it was about exposing abuse of power. And everyone in Maple Grove could feel it brewing like a summer thunderstorm. Marjorie's defiance had turned one petty HOA violation into a movement. The board's secrecy, her evidence, and the viral spotlight had reshaped the neighborhood's sense of power, and the storm's peak was just hours away. As the sun dipped behind the row of manicured trees, the tension thickened. Cars lined the street outside the community hall. Residents stood in clusters, murmuring predictions. Some smiled nervously. Others avoided eye contact with Denise as she marched past, files clutched tight. Inside, Marjorie waited, binder resting on her lap. Her hands were steady. The faint hum of the air conditioner filled the silence before the meeting began. You could almost taste the anticipation. At exactly 6 o'clock, Denise struck the gavel. The meeting is now in session. And just like that, the battle officially began. The meeting hall was packed, standing room only. Even the usually quiet retirees had come out for this one. I could hear the nervous shuffle of papers, the soft whir of the ceiling fan above, and beneath it all, the tension, the kind that hums just before lightning strikes. Denise opened with formality, her tone crisp but brittle. We are here to address noncompliance and public disruption concerning exterior paint standards. Marjorie didn't rise immediately. She let the silence expand until people shifted uncomfortably. When she finally stood, the room went still. She placed her binder on the table with a soft thud, the sound of a woman who had done her homework. She began by thanking the board for their service, polite to a fault. Then she referenced her original approval form, dated March 2022, signed by a prior chair. She cited Article 9, Section B.3, and then, slowly, handed Denise a printed copy of the April 4th meeting agenda, the one marked "Palette Revisions, Postponed." It was surgical. Calm. Devastating. Denise's hand trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. Everyone in the room saw it. And in that subtle movement, we knew, Marjorie had them cornered. The board's attorney, a volunteer who lived on the next block, tried to interject with procedural jargon, but Marjorie anticipated every word. She pointed to the bylaw requiring a full board vote and reminded them that minutes must be publicly posted. Then she produced the evidence that no such minutes existed. Each page she laid down was a nail in the coffin of their authority. The audience murmured, some recording on their phones despite that no recording sign taped near the podium. Denise's face hardened. We're not here to debate old paperwork, she said sharply, but it sounded like surrender disguised as control. Marjorie simply smiled, turned to the crowd, and said, not in words, but with her presence, that this was how you fight back. Calm, prepared, and relentless. The board called a recess. Outside, the air was thick with late summer humidity. The sky burned pink above the streetlights. Neighbors whispered in clusters, speculating whether the board could actually lose. When the session resumed, Denise returned pale but composed. The attorney read a clarified resolution aloud, his voice shaky. Due to procedural inconsistencies in the adoption of the revised color palette, enforcement actions related to exterior colors are hereby suspended pending full review. It wasn't an apology, but it was enough. A cheer rose before the attorney could finish reading. Someone clapped. Then someone else. The sound filled the hall, rolling like thunder. Marjorie exhaled, slow and steady, the kind of breath you take when you know you've just changed something bigger than yourself. But she wasn't finished, not yet. Because victory without accountability is just delay. And she was about to make sure this never happened again. In the days that followed, the board tried to move on quietly, posting a bland notice online, pending review of procedural matters. But Marjorie knew how quickly memory fades, so she acted fast. She gathered signatures for a petition demanding bylaw transparency, specifically, a rule that any amendment required mailed notice to all homeowners 30 days before a vote. It wasn't revenge by fire, it was revenge by precision. The petition gained traction overnight. By week's end, 75% of the neighborhood had signed. Denise had no choice but to call a special election. When the ballots came back, the motion passed unanimously. And just like that, the board's quiet reign of fear began to crumble. Marjorie's red door stayed. No fine. No repaint. Just that same gleam of color at the end of Elmcrest Drive, a reminder that even in the most rigid systems, individuality can survive if someone's stubborn enough to defend it. I remember passing by one morning, coffee in hand, as sunlight hit the crimson paint. It glowed like a victory banner. Kids riding their bikes would point and say, "That's the door that made the board mad." And maybe that's what it had become, a symbol of standing your ground in a world obsessed with sameness. But the real beauty? The HOA didn't realize what they'd created. They'd turned a small neighborhood disagreement into a blueprint for resistance. Because after Maple Grove, other communities started asking the same question: who actually holds the power, the board, or the people paying the dues? Weeks later, during one final meeting before she stepped down, Denise quietly resigned as HOA chair. She cited stress and personal commitments. No one believed her. The new board was smaller, more reasonable. They invited Marjorie to join the design committee, which she politely declined. She didn't need a title. She already had her victory hanging on its hinges. In her studio, Marjorie painted again, not houses, but canvases. She called her latest series, Rules of Color. Each piece was a door, one blue, one green, one scarlet, painted against endless beige walls. She donated the first painting to the community hall. It hung right next to the meeting minutes for that fateful June 22 session. The caption read, "Approved by the people." The community slowly found peace again. The lawns still matched. The mailboxes stayed aligned. But beneath it all was something new, a quiet awareness that rules can bend when enough people push. Marjorie didn't brag, didn't gloat. But sometimes, when she watered her roses and caught a neighbor's glance, she'd nod slightly, like two conspirators sharing a secret. Her fight had outgrown Maple Grove. It had become a story whispered in other cul-de-sacs, retold in community groups, referenced in HOA forums. A retired painter with a red door had become the symbol of lawful rebellion. And that's how one stubborn homeowner turned a petty fine into a satisfying revenge story, a real-life lesson in what happens when bureaucracy meets backbone. Even now, when I pass that street at dusk, the light hits the red paint just so, reflecting off the glass like an ember refusing to die. They tried to paint over her. She made them see color instead. The board didn't just lose a case, they lost their grip. And Maple Grove? It found something even better than uniformity: accountability. Tell me your HOA horror in one line, because somewhere out there, another red door is waiting to fight back.